Awesome. I think we'll quickly start. We have a pretty jam-packed session, so let's get started as more people come in. Hi, everyone. My name is Priyanka, and I'd like to welcome you to the third session of our community of practice on power of parents, which we are organizing with support from the MC2H Foundation. In this session today, we're going to ask the question around what is it going to take to build strong and trusted partnerships between parents and classrooms, one that can be sustained over time and one that keeps the child at the center. But a little bit about GSF before I get into the agenda for today. For those of you who are new, the Global Schools Forum is a collaborative community, an innovation accelerator, and a partnership builder for non-state organizations working to improve education at scale for underserved children in low and middle-income countries. Currently, we have 169 organizations that are a part of our network, working across 63 countries, impacting 133 million children through 1.3 million schools. A little bit about the learning series itself. So we know parents are at the heart of a child's learning in early and primary years, yet there are many times when we haven't been able to meaningfully engage them. Through this 4-part learning series, what we really want to do is to reimagine the role of parents as equal partners in their child's learning. We've so far planned for 4 sessions, and in each of the sessions, we've picked on a different but slightly interconnected theme. In our first session, we really celebrated parents as literacy champions, and we acknowledged that everyday practices like storytelling or praying are all legitimate tools for literacy development. So the session really challenged us to broaden our perspective about literacy as a whole. In our second session, we explored community-led parenting models for literacy development. Parenting need not be an isolated effort, and communities can play a critical role in designing and delivering parenting interventions. So that's what we explored in the previous session. In our third session today, we are going to move into the school space and move away slightly from home and community, but really talk about what would it take to strengthen parent-community classroom partnerships. And in the session following this, we're going to talk about fathers who've traditionally been under-leveraged stakeholder in parenting programs. So we're going to talk about how can we better engage fathers in parental engagement. A little bit about this learning space as people are continuing to join in. We developed this learning space with a 5-fold objective in mind. One was just to deepen understanding of promising strategies, innovations, tools in this space, what they are, where they exist, how do they work. The second sort of goal of setting up this space was also to start conversation around what would it take to adapt some of these tools and innovations to our own context. We know there are no copy-paste solutions in this field. So really taking that conversation to the next level and thinking about what would it take for us to make solutions relevant and contextual, that's truly meaningful for the communities that we work with. The third was just to build a community of people who truly deeply care about this topic and just create a space for them to connect with each other, discuss feedback, frustration, solutions with each other honestly, and find opportunities to collaborate with each other. We also wanted to build a shared practitioner voice for the sector on the power of parents. What are the challenges that practitioners face? Where do they need support? So in the long term, we can use that to inform programming, advocacy, or funding available in this area. And lastly was just to codify innovations from the field up and develop them as useful, usable insights that can support other practitioners who are already working in this field or who are interested to come into this field. Couple of housekeeping points. One, this session is being recorded, so we will share the link to the recording with you afterwards in case you'd like to revisit anything interesting or useful that you heard today. We also have dedicated time for Q&A, but please feel free to use the chat anytime to share your thoughts, ask questions, share reflections. You can also use the raise hand feature if you'd like to ask your question directly to the presenter. We also would love if you're able to turn on your camera if your internet bandwidth allows for it. It's always lovely to connect names and faces. We'll also be using Mentimeter for one poll today. So if you can keep a phone or a browser tab handy, that'll be super useful. We'll also have 2 breakout group discussions. We'd love for you to stay in those breakout group discussions and engage. That's where sort of more focused conversations happen and most synergies can be found. So we'd urge you to join and participate in these group discussions as possible. And lastly, we'll launch a short poll at the end to gather your feedback. This is just a very, very quick 30-second poll, which is going to be hugely useful for us to continue to think about what we can do differently and continue to make these sessions relevant for you in the future. Jumping very, very quickly into the agenda. Once this introduction is over, we're going to have 3 very snappy presentations. We're first going to hear from the Brookings Institution, where they're going to present their global tools and rubrics derived as part of their work with the Family School Parenting Initiative. We're then going to move on to AfriKids, who's going to talk about the MMO framework, which is the Means Motive Opportunity Framework for Parental and School collaboration, which they're implementing in Ghana. And then we're going to hear from Simple Education Foundation based in India, where they're going to talk about how they are integrating parental voice through school management committees and playful material for parents. After that, we'll have time for Q&A, but like we said, you don't have to wait for so long to ask your questions, so please continue to use the chat as you like. And then we'll have one small focus group deep dive with the presenter, where you can have focused conversation on the tools and learnings that they have presented, and then we'll wrap up with closing and reflections. So this is a very timely moment to now introduce our presenters. A very warm welcome to Dr. Emily, Richa, David, and Akriti to our session today. We're very, very excited to have you today with us, and we're excited to learn more from you on the work that you have done in this super interesting topic. We'd like to, Emily and Richa join us from Center for Universal Education at the Brookings Institution. David joins us from AfriKids Ghana, and Akriti joins us from Simple Education Foundation in India. Okay, so that brings us to the topic for today. I'm going to just quickly do some context setting before I pass it on to the Brookings team. A couple of things, it's a pretty dense slide. I won't spend a lot of time here, but I just wanted to reiterate that this is the 3rd session that we are doing in this learning series. We've already done sort of 2 sessions. So in case you missed those discussions, this is largely a very, very high level summary of the 4 and 5 themes that were emerging from some of our initial discussions. This is just for you to situate the conversation today. We will not be getting into each of these learnings right now, but just if you could quickly glance through and hold on to it as we kind of move on to the discussion today. If you'd like to deep dive further on any of these themes, we'll just quickly drop in the links to the recordings of the previous sessions, so you're able to go into some of these details at a time that's convenient for you. But bringing back to the objective for today, we have 4 objectives that we want to achieve over the next 1 hour, 30 minutes or so. The first objective really is to appreciate the role of parental knowledge and lived experience and truly consider it as an asset for improving learning in the classroom. The second is to talk about structural, situational, political, logistical barriers that actually hinder some of this participation between homes, communities, and classroom. Our third objective then is to explore innovative strategies, practices, tools that can potentially act as entry points to improve this collaboration. And largely, the last objective, which is the most important for us, is for you to think about how can you adapt some of this learning to your own context. I'm just going to start off the discussion then for today with a high-level group reflection on 2 questions. Again, these questions, there's no right and wrong answer. It's just an opportunity for us to surface your perspective and diversity of thought in the group. We're going to use the Mentimeter to answer those 2 questions. So if you can use either of the 3 methods to get onto Menti, that will get us started on the group reflection activity. We'll also just put the code and the web link in the chat, so you're able to access those easily. As you're doing that, I'm going to also switch my screen and move on to Menti. So just give me 10 seconds to do that. Awesome. So the first question that we wanted to start with was just what do you think in your own context is unique knowledge that parents are bringing to the schools that is currently overlooked? It can be a cultural story, it can be insights into child's emotional well-being, etc. So this is just a chance for you to reflect a little bit on sort of what do you think is most overlooked in your own context. So we've already started to get some answers. So we are hearing things on family and cultural knowledge. There's another point on local culture, history, environment, indigenous knowledge. It's also something on understanding of children's ability. So it's a lot of like either cultural uh, knowledge pieces that are missing, or just home-based knowledge around what does a child like, how does the child like to study, what works for them, what makes them tick. Some of those are, I think, the two large themes that I am seeing here right now. And I think these are like important knowledge pieces that's extremely valuable if we can figure out a way to integrate it in school learning. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to move us to the next question, which is really just a scale on how do you think is your school currently placing and prioritizing parental and community knowledge. It's a scale of 1 to 5 from not at all. Currently, parents are just receiving information, or extensively, which is truly a deep, meaningful partnership. So currently we are at a 2.9, which kind of means that we're listening to parents, but it's really not always integrating what they are saying in our programs. So there's some level of consultation happening, but it's truly not equal or always meaningful. If anybody wrote a 4 or a 5, would love to hear from you as well. Maybe you could put in your chat on what you're doing to make that partnership happen truly meaningfully. Awesome. So this was really to get you to start thinking a little bit about this topic, but I'm going to pass it on to the Brookings team to talk about what will it take really for us to move that scale from like a 2.6 where we ended to truly a 5, and what's that journey looking like, and what tools, resources will we need to get us to that goal. Over to you, Emily.
Thank you so much, and great to be with everyone. Thanks for the invitation to be here. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the research and the framing, and then hand to Richa to talk a little bit about how we're working with schools to support them in the planning of family engagement. So I'm going to start with a few slides. And just a little bit, I am a researcher at the Brookings Institution. So Richa and I lead our family engagement research team at the Brookings Institution, which is a research or what we call a think tank. We do a lot of policy research. We're based in Washington, but we work globally. We've been around for over 100 years. And we have a lot of different teams at Brookings, but we work on the team that really helps build research around the world, bring people together to talk about research and use research, help orient policy towards research, as well as helping education leaders, schools have the tools they need to do the work that they do best. And so I'll talk a little bit bit about some of the family engagement research that we've been working on. We have been doing all this work with the Family Engagement and Education Network, and the Global Schools Forum is a part of our network. We have over 62 plus organizations from from 6 continents, from Northern America, Southern America, Africa, Asia, Europe, and Oceania, part of our collaborative. And so we've been developing tools for schools for doing research, as well as doing planning that Richard will talk to you about in a minute, as well as learning from each other. And so we'll jump into some of our tools today. Really, we're going to focus on our global rubrics tool, which is what we help schools use for planning. And we have other tools that help schools with research, looking for strategies on how to build families into the work that we do, as well as some of our other research. And we'll share some of the links. Before I jump too far into what are we finding, what do we know about family school community engagement? What does it mean? So it really, family school community engagement means a lot of different things, but I wanted to start with asking you all in a poll. So Ajay is going to share a poll for all of you, but wondering, in the schools that you're working with and the communities that you're working with, what is the most common way that families are involved, or parents, caregivers are involved in the schools? So if you can just select the one that's most common. We'll see just a second what you say. Hopefully we can share the results and see what you all said. And if you can't access the poll, you can also put it into the chat. Is it possible to share the results? There we go. Here's what you're saying. Attending school events seems to be the highest, followed by caregiving and work at home, communicating with teachers, and decision making, pretty high up there. But attending school events and building community. Okay. So what we've been finding in the research, we'll go to the next slide, is really the research kind of builds, and this is built on Joyce Epstein's work of the different types of family engagement and involvement, that families are involved in many ways, as you all know, and as you've said in your earlier Mentimeter. Caregiving and learning at home, the work that families do to support the well-being of their children and helping build learning and helping make sure that children are able to get to school, that they're healthy, that they're taken care of. So that's really an important part of family engagement. There's also the communicating with the school, with the teachers, with the educators, as well as volunteering time and resources. And volunteering time can be for events at school, but it also can be, so it can be participating in events at school, but it also can be helping with ensuring that children have school health and connections to important resources in the community. Decision making and leadership. So we'll hear from teams today that are doing innovative work in decision making and leadership with school management committees, parent councils, different groups that help with decision making and leadership. But building a community is also really important. And this is really, it can mean building connections to the knowledges of families at home. It can be building connections with external groups such as clinics or reading groups or community leaders. And so all of these are important family engagement. When we've been talking with families, what is the most common form? A family member will say, a parent or caregiver will say the caregiving and learning at home is the majority of the work they do in family involvement. A smaller proportion of families that have the opportunity to get involved in decision making and leadership, but all families are really involved in caregiving and learning at home. When you ask an educator or an education leader, they'll tend to tell you it's family engagement is when families are communicating or showing up to our events, but family engagement is all of these things, and families and the work that they do and recognizing the work that they do at home and the knowledges they bring is so critical to building strong partnerships. So I'm going to go on to the next piece of the question for you and ask you, what are some of the most common challenges that you experience in your communities and schools and that parents and caregivers have in being involved in their children's learning? So we're going to share another poll with you. Seeing a few in the chat, lacking of confidence. Family support with disability knowledge, important. Keep us moving. So looking at what you're saying, the biggest challenges that you're experiencing or seeing is financial constraints, as well as literacy, language, and cultural barriers. Lack of interest, lack of time is a little bit less, lack of technology, welcoming. And I see in the chat a couple of questions of lack of confidence. And we would really break into, what does lack of confidence mean? Does it mean that you don't feel welcome and belong? Does it mean you don't know kind of the how to engage, or is it a literacy level? And so we would look at, but lack of confidence and lack of knowing how to engage is an important piece of all this. So with the research that we've been seeing and looking at, we've found and we've broken barriers really into situational and structural. So those that are really posed by school and society, such as lack of transportation to get to schools or to meet with to meetings between families and educators, the safety and welcoming of an environment, communication. So maybe there's not really opportunities for involvement. Maybe schools feel pretty closed to families. And then there's those on the side of the situational, which are fewer, but health and well-being of a disability of a parent or a caregiver can contribute to that, as well as interest or motivation. We found most of the barriers, though, overlap. Financial constraints of a family. Maybe they're working in a income and generating activity or livelihoods activity where they can't take time away without risking having food on the table for their family. Maybe it's lack of time. They have children at many schools or they live very far away. And it's also technology as well as literacy, language, and cultural barriers. Maybe a family speaks a different language than spoken at the school, or low literacy of a parent caregiver. And so it's all of these factors. When we asked families, the biggest ones was lack of time and financial constraints. When we asked educators, they said time and financial constraints, but they also said lack of interest of families. So there was a bit of putting it on the families. But when we really looked at it with families, it wasn't a lack of interest. It was often the structural barriers that they faced. So what we've been doing is really also helping to measure and monitor and think about, how do we plan for building family partnerships? What do we need to do to understand how to build these partnerships? We have also been looking at relational trust, and we've been developing a scale that we've been using in a survey with schools and communities to look at 7 elements. Do we have shared beliefs on education? Do we have a culture of listening? Can families be heard? Not just sending information to families, but do we have a culture of listening to families? Do we feel respect for educators, for students, for families? Is there a culture of care? Integrity? Are we following up with our promises and commitments that we make to each other? And are we treating families as if they are competent and important caregivers and valuing their knowledge, as well as valuing the knowledge and the competence of educators as well and students? And then finally, do we have opportunities to interact with each other? And so these elements are really critical to trust. And one of the tools that we've been using with schools is our rubrics. And I'm going to hand on to Richa to introduce you to the rubrics.
Thank you, Emily. So as Emily mentioned, the rubrics is a great tool for schools to use to reflect on, assess, and plan for family, school, community engagement activities in hopes of making schools more inclusive and welcoming to all families, and really allowing schools and families to build trust between each other. The tool, the rubrics, has four essential elements which enable welcoming and inclusive schools. These are creating an inclusive culture, building trusting relationships, leveraging families as assets, and sustaining meaningful family, school, community engagement practices. So as I mentioned, how can the rubrics help teams? It helps you reflect on where you currently are. It helps you map and vision how practices and school policies can be inclusive and equitable. It also helps schools identify existing support mechanisms. So what resources, policies, structures already exist that are supporting family, school, community partnerships. And it's also a way to help hold school and family leaders accountable to strengthening these partnerships in school. So how do we use this tool? We recommend that school teams that usually consist of school leaders, teachers, other staff, parents, parent representatives, whether you have parent-teacher associations, school management committees, and other community and family groups. Students can be involved in this activity as well. We also recommend that it's co-led by two people, one parent leader, parent champion, and one educator or somebody from the school. And the hope is that they come together to evaluate their practices together. What is the process? It goes through three steps. So each individual within the school team will rate their school across these elements. So where am I? Are we at an early? Are we at a proficient? And then we bring all of the individual ratings together and we consolidate it into a group rating. So collectively, as a collective, where do we think our school is on each of these elements? And then we use that data as a springboard for discussion. So what are we doing well? What can we do better? And what are some strategies that we can use to go, let's say, from point 2 to point 3 on the rubric? Before I jump into that, I'm going to pause here to see if you have any questions, and then we're going to get into a short activity where we will give you one of the rubrics. So the rubric, there are 12 rubrics in this tool. We'll give you a lot more time to explore this after the workshop, but we're going to jump into one of the rubrics and we're going to take you through this process, individually rating your own school, and then in a breakout room, we're going to discuss your ratings and see, you know, what evidence do you have? What are you doing well? What can you do better? And then identify some strategies. So if we're ready, I'm going to move on to the next slide, which is one of the rubrics. So this rubric is around how is a school ensuring effective two-way communication with families to sustain a positive relationship. So if you look on the left, the indicator of practice, this is the rubric. So at a rating 1 or not yet, the communication between educators and families is one way, with one group telling the other what they think they need to hear without listening to the other's perspective. So at a 1, it's a lot of one-way communication. At a 2, communication is still largely one way, but there are few opportunities to listen to the other's perspective. At a 3, communication is largely two-way. There are some feedback loops to hear other people's needs and perspectives, although this is limited. And at a 4, communication is two-way with meaningful opportunities to listen to perspective, and this feedback is used to improve plans and actions. So what I'm going to do is send you this rubric in the chat so you have that. We are going to jump into breakout rooms. Please take 2 minutes to individually think about your own school and how communication is, like where it falls on this rubric. And then we're going to have a 10-minute group discussion in your breakout rooms. And these are the questions. Share what you rated your school, share why you rated your school the way you did, and discuss what it might take. So what are some strategies to move your schools to a proficient or an excelling? So let me stop sharing my screen. I'm going to put some things in the chat so you all have it. So you have in the chat the link to the rubric. I think Ajay or Priyanka are soon going to open breakout rooms. Spend 2 minutes to just reflect on the rubric, and then we're going to have a short discussion, and the questions are in the chat. Before the breakout rooms are open, are there any questions? All clear? The instructions, we're good to go? Okay, I'm seeing some head nodding and no questions, so I'm then taking that as a positive sign. Priyanka, Ajay, please open breakout rooms. Thank you all for participating in that activity. I hope you had the opportunity to engage briefly with one rubric, share a little bit of your reflections, and hopefully get into some discussion on strategy. I know we're running a little bit short of time, so maybe I will summarize on my group, and then Emily, I will maybe nominate somebody. Maybe you can nominate somebody from your group. So what we discussed was a lot of our practices are still one way. School parent-teacher meetings are often the medium for family engagement. But we also discussed some interesting strategies that we heard from different folks, a community of practice with schools, families, community members, and local governments to discuss topics that are relevant and hold schools and family leaders accountable, a listening engagement from Sierra Leone where they're using pictorial icons to help families participate in decision makings in school and decide on what is important and how and what they want to work towards, and asking parents, school leaders, and local leaders their perspective on what will lead to student success. And this forces everyone to be a part of the conversation, but also forces everyone to listen to other perspectives and jointly decide based on the many ideas that they've heard. So I'll pause there. Emily, handing to you.
Yes, briefly, we heard about how families of children with disabilities often have to engage. The communication is more different, etc. So there's a lot to learn from also families of children with disabilities. Also heard some great examples of decision making in Sierra Leone. And then Gargi, as got cut off at the end, was talking a little bit about building two-way communication. So I'm going to just ask if Gargi wants to say 30 seconds or less on sort of what you were sharing at the end.
Yeah, thank you so much, Shamini. So I just adding on to what everyone shared in the group, I just wanted to add this point where maybe for the two-way communication, I strongly feel like we have seen around that through different modes, through different activities, through different interaction with the parents and teachers, where parents, teachers, and students are equally engaged. So by creating safe space where not just students, but also parents feel more confident and they are more sure that they will be heard and they get this recognition that, okay, whatever we have shared so far is actually has been taken into consideration. There have been certain changes where they are not just only getting heard, but also they are getting the idea that, okay, everything that we have shared has been implemented and there have been certain changes in the system because we have shared something. It actually, in a way, strengthen their belief in the stakeholders, which end up making the communication more frequent, and at the same time it end up being a two-way communication which is totally based on trust and a lot of effort from the different stakeholders that coming together for with the same objective or with the same mindset. So yeah, thanks, Emily.
Thank you so much. Handing back to Priyanka.
Thank you so much, Emily and Richa, for walking us through the global rubrics and tools and for taking us through a very practical exercise. We'll share the full set of rubrics with everyone with the takeaways email as well. But for those of you who'd like to go deeper into the tool and would like to explore how you can apply it in your own program, feel free to join the second breakout group discussion with Brookings, which is scheduled for a little bit later in the session. I'm going to now pass it on to David to take us through the work that AfriKids is doing and introduce the MMO framework to the rest of the community. Over to you, David.
Well, thanks, Priyanka, for this opportunity. And good afternoon, good evening, depending on wherever you are located. My name is David, and I am the Country Director of AfriKids. I'm making this presentation on behalf of AfriKids. Before I proceed, let me just say that AfriKids is a partnership between two independent organizations, AfriKids UK, which is a UK-based charity, and AfriKids Ghana, a Ghanaian non-governmental organization. This partnership has survived over 25 years, and we are still here. Today, our presentation is going to focus on AfriKids' work in the areas of education. And I will want to indicate that our work in education is as old as AfriKids itself. We've been mobilizing communities through various forms to improve upon enrollment or access and learning outcomes for schools across unserviced communities in the northern parts of this country. Over the period, we did achieve some great impact, especially in the area of mobilizing children into school and improving learning outcomes through our interventions in early years education, out of school interventions, and also inclusive education strategies. However, whilst we're making this impact and sending droves of children into school through various innovations, we also learned the critical role that parents play towards improving and sustaining the gains that we did attain during the course of our intervention. And so we've been trying to find ways of getting parents involved in the education process of their children. But then we realized that it was quite difficult because some parents were resistant for obvious reasons which we discussed earlier. I wouldn't want to go over some of those reasons. But the major one for us, very critical, was that we felt that parents who didn't have the economic capacity to sustain themselves, didn't have the confidence to engage. As a result of that, in 2022, when AfriKids had the opportunity to design a new strategy, we came out with a framework, which we refer to as the Means Motive Opportunity Framework. This framework is purposely structured to engage parents in the learning processes. So I'll proceed to share with you what we do under the various pathways. I'll begin with the means pathway. As I indicated, when parents are economically handicapped, they don't have the confidence, they don't feel encouraged to engage with school authorities, because these school authorities are usually teachers, head teachers, and so on. These are literate, and for a mother who has not been to school, who is struggling economically, to engage with a teacher to discuss about their ward's performance in school is a very rare development in our space. And so you find these parents unengaged. To solve this problem, AfriKids launched our Livelihood Empowerment Program, which seeks to empower parents economically to be able to provide basic needs for their children. On this presentation today, we have chosen to highlight one of the activities we undertake under our Livelihood Empowerment Intervention. And this is the VSLA concept, which is not new. But the reason why the VSLA is very critical for AfriKids in terms of how parents integrate with the learning process is because of how we have chosen to run our VSLA associations. VSLA meetings happens once a month, and we have structured this to take place on Fridays in the afternoon. Usually late afternoons in Ghana, the last 2 periods are dedicated for extracurricular. We refer to them as extracurricular activities. And this is when you have schools, clubs, cultural performances, sporting activities taking place. And the parents also hold their meetings to coincide with this period. The reason is we want parents to have first-hand exposure of what their children are doing in school, especially the skills that they are acquiring beyond just what they learn in the classroom. And to our surprise, some parents have found it interesting to participate in some of these activities, especially with the cultural performances. And so we see a direct link between VSLA activities and school activities through their meetings. Also, because these meetings happens at school, parents are able to engage with teachers. Teachers take turns to share with these parents their challenges, to speak with specific parents about concerns that they have about their children, especially with regards to the care that is given to the child. And so parents can easily, teachers can easily reach out to these parents to discuss personal or unique challenges. As part of the VSLA, they have a component of money that they keep from their contributions, which they refer to as the Education Development Fund. Now, this fund is set aside from their share out, and the women or the mothers determine what to use this money for in the school. Because they come to school on a weekly basis and they engage both teachers and children, they understand the needs of the school. And when they have resources, they know where to invest such resources. And so this is the reason why VSLA is, for us, very significant, because of the fact that it takes the parents closer to the school environment, but for which parents ideally wouldn't have been so regular within the school communities. The second aspect is for us to look at developing the self-belief and confidence amongst parents. And this is what we refer to in our language as the motive. Building the motive for parents to want to see their children through school and supporting them at home to equally learn. And so we hold structured sessions using our social behavior change communication approaches to engage them. Our community is a male-dominated society. And so sometimes you find gender roles being well-defined. And so boys or males have their rules, women also do. And you dare not attempt to overlap. Now, this creates for us a situation of sometimes overwhelming, especially the girls. And so one of the key issues we discussed during our SBCC engagement is to look at the roles within the community to ensure that our girls are not overwhelmed. Sometimes, because of this, they get to school tired and are not able to participate in the learning process. And the general narrative that is being developed is girls are generally not intelligent to be in school, forgetting the amount of work they give to them. So we engage with them in all these areas. We also take them through the process of reflecting to look at how parents socially are carrying themselves around in a manner that will not cause harm to children, especially with regards, to their learning. As a result of these discussions and sharing with them the opportunities that they have to still engage their children through folklore, songs, storytelling, and even just conversations as a way of enhancing their learning, we are beginning to see some transformation and changes in that regard. This is an example of how parents, after having gone through our SBCC sessions, our community scorecard conversations, interfacing between teachers and mothers, is beginning to lead to some improved learning outcomes, generally as a result of the engagement that we are seeing parents now having, with their children. We have seen in just a year, positive attitudes towards play increasing from 37 to about 51%. And this is clearly an improvement that we have seen in our environment, where usually parents feel withdrawn and don't think that learning is one of the things that they have a role to. They believe that that is just for the school and that is only for the teacher. But from our engagement session, they are now beginning to see the link between what is learned in the classroom and what is also happening at home, and how the two need to work together for the child to thrive. Participation is very important in all of this. If parents even have the economic abilities, if they have the mindset, but then if there are no deliberate means through which they can engage with the school system, then we are still not going to make progress. And so we are working with our partners, the Ghana Education Service and the local community, to revamp the processes that we know exist to enhance the two-way communication that we were talking about in the previous session. In Ghana, school performance appraisal meetings is supposed to be an important activity that each school is supposed to organize at least once a year. But this is not happening. You hardly will find schools organizing this. But in schools where we work, we have been able to convene school performance appraisal meetings, and these meetings have resulted in the co-creation of activity plans. We refer to these activity plans as quality-oriented school performance improvement plans. These are plans that are jointly developed by parents, school children, and teachers, highlighting their challenges and coming out with strategies, local strategies on how to fix these challenges. And we believe that this is a more structured way for parents to get involved. It also promotes accountability, because then the three different groups are able to, during the review of their performance, ask questions on why certain things aren't happening. And knowing this, people are more responsive to actions that they all jointly agree to in the school system. We also encourage that for the selection of school management committee executives, i.e. the chairperson, the vice chairperson, and the secretary, should be done democratically to ensure that these representatives are more responsive to the needs of the community, so that when they fail to deliver on their mandate doesn't get renewed. And because people will value these positions, when they assume onto them and they know how they will perpetuate or continue to serve the people, they do what is expected of them. So these are the ways that we try to create the engagement with the school system to facilitate proper learning outcomes for our children. Although this is happening so well in our 60 schools, we have been thinking of how to scale this up. Fortunately for us, we are coming to the end of our first phase of our strategy, which is the strategy that contains the means, motive, opportunity framework. And so we are now thinking of how to shape in this MMO framework in a manner that will be able to achieve scale, because we can see this happening in the 60 schools, but it's not just enough for this to happen in our target schools. This should be a nationwide agenda. And so that is what we are beginning to work on. And so we are still maintaining that children in rural communities are not reaching their learning potential because communities are not fully equipped and engaged in the existing education program. And so we want to look at how we will come out with innovative strategies to ensure that the entirety, especially of underserved communities, are involved in the learning process. And we are beginning to come out with solutions such as setting up parents' learning cycles as a way of parents influencing each other, as a forum for flexible conversations, and also in some way sharing experiences and trying to create some sense of accountability amongst them, training parents to understand data. In our current program, we appreciate that sometimes during school appraisal meetings, parents find it difficult interpreting school scores. We want to see how we can localize school scores so that parents can appreciate it by using just color codes. For red to stand for poor performance, amber, average, and green will be very good to excellent students. So these are some of the things that we are envisioning into the future. Hopefully come January 2026, we may be piloting our new scalable model, which we refer to as the riser. Thank you very much, and I'm here to take any questions that they emerge.
Thanks, David. I think a great reminder that to build sustainable partnerships between parents and school, we need more than information. We also need system structures, mindset shifts, and real opportunities for engagement. So thank you for presenting this to the group. Now, in the interest of time, I think I'm just going to move to India, where we'll hear from Akriti about the work that Simple Education Foundation is doing. I know we're a little bit tight on time, Akriti, so we'll just keep this to 10 minutes, and then we can dive deeper into the details during our breakout discussion right after. But for the larger group, if you have any questions for either the Brookings team or the AfriKids team, please keep them coming over the chat, and we'll try and answer them either over the chat or in the breakout group or the structured Q&A time that we have right after this. Over to you, Akriti.
Hello, hi all. I'm Akriti from Simple Education Foundation, and I'm really excited to be here today to share our journey and also learn from all the diverse organizations and participants of this communities of practice. The intervention that we're sharing about today has been operational in our partner schools for a year now, and it has been focused on building meaningful parent-school partnerships in rural government schools. So I'll just begin with a glimpse of where we work. This is our terrain, and our work is in partnership with 5 rural government schools at the foothills of Himalayas in a block called Narendra Nagar in Uttarakhand. These are the primary government schools, which means we have students from grade 1 to 5 enrolled here. Usually these schools have around 20 to 30 students, and single teacher schools are a reality in most of them. So classrooms are multi-grade and mixed level. Head teachers usually shoulder both duties, like as in teaching as well as the administrative responsibilities. And parents in the community are mostly daily wage earners or migrant families who've come in for construction projects, or they are agricultural workers or local shopkeepers. Um, in terms of school community partnerships, we see some very common challenges. Um, Usually, seeing that communication is mostly one way from school to home, like we also discussed earlier today. There's also not much clarity among school leaders on what meaningful engagement or fruitful partnerships could really look like. Parents have limited time to engage. Fathers are mostly at work. Mothers often trek long distances to collect firewood or graze animals. Formal structures like school management committees do exist, but they are often sporadically active and not usually or always inclusive. And for some context, SMCs are mandated by India's Right to Education Act of 2009 to ensure parental and community involvement in government schools. Uh, so our goal was to move beyond this kind of sporadic involvement and functionalize the structure to create a sustained collaboration. And for this, we focused on 3 pillars. First being creating consistent spaces for interaction. The RTE already mandates 1 SMC meeting a month. We wanted to make those sort of count. Strengthening parents' identity as partners in learning. As we also saw earlier, a lot of deep-rooted societal and school level mindsets also limit parent involvement in the child's learning. And thirdly, just revitalizing SMCs to make them more participatory and representative of the community voice. And to do this, our approach was two-pronged. We envisioned homes and schools as shared learning ecosystems. In this model, we work towards making home active learning spaces where parents could confidently support learning. And we also supported schools to become spaces that are open to community voice, where parents can feel seen, heard, and valued. And this is how we
Hi there, I think she's on mute.
Akriti, we can't hear you. Akriti, we've lost your audio. Akriti, can you hear us? Sorry, we've lost you. We couldn't hear you at all. Hi, Akriti, can you hear us?
Hello.
I think we
Hello.
may have audio, but there's one question on the chat for AfriKids team. Maybe we can take
Hello.
that as please sorting out her audio. David, there
Hello.
was a question from Meredith around where do you hold the CSC and GSI discussions? And do you offer any sort of payment to parents in exchange for their attendance, or are they just attending some of these for their own benefit? So if you just want to elaborate on that a little bit. Eric had started to respond, but I thought it might be useful to just add more details.
Yes, I've seen Eric trying to respond, but of course, this is an opportunity for me to probably give a bit of context to the question, especially with regards to. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Oh, sorry, we can. Yes.
Okay, all right. Yeah, so we actually don't pay people to attend meetings. These are already existing groups. For the VSLA groups, these are existing groups, and they already have their scheduled meetings. Their meetings are driven by their own motivation to come make their savings and have discussions generally about their wards, education, and so we don't really pay them for attending such sessions. Same with community scorecard activities. These are activities that are scheduled to happen just within the community. The farthest walking distance someone can travel to a school for this meeting, I think maximum would be maybe 1.5 kilometers. They live within the school environment, and so converging is not difficult to bring them together for their meeting. So we do not pay them. But the fact is that the community scorecards and JC discussions are all separate, different sessions. The community scorecard also happens, it's an annual event, which begins with communities groups meeting to discuss their priorities, to discuss the challenges they have with the school environment that they have observed. They discuss issues ranging from infrastructure of the school land being encroached upon, teachers' attendance, people's performance, and so on. And then after they've taken note of their concerns, we then create the next stage of the engagement, which is usually the interface. So the interface is actually an interaction between service provider and then service beneficiaries. And here, they are supposed to discuss the concerns that they have about the school. Sometimes if it's about teachers, attendance, and lack of seriousness from the side of the teachers, you can have some of these conversations escalate to some extent, but we always ensure that we will be around during such interactions to manage, emotions and to ensure that the discussions are happening more in a positive, from a positive perspective. And so these discussions happen. At the end of the day, both the service providers and the recipients come together, agree on what they think are concerns, and come out with appropriate steps that they will want to use to deal with the issues within their school environment. So these are activities that happen separately. The JC discussion in itself, it's more aligned to our social and behavior change communication component, where it's more of a mainstream conversation. And here we discuss issues around gender roles, we discuss issues about norms around gender issues, and trying to make our communities and community members feel more gender friendly, have an understanding on what the whole concept of JC is about, and to ensure that we grow in a society where there is equality in terms of men-female relationship. Because we have a background where, I mean, women are usually not being treated right, if I'm allowed to say so. But then we believe that this will have to change. This situation will have to change. And so we engage our men in particular to appreciate the roles of the woman and to provide support where it's possible. And we really saw a number of positive signs of men coming to meetings and to say that, look, yesterday I had to prepare jollof because rice for the family. My wife went for a funeral. She didn't come early. In the past, I would have waited for her to arrive anytime and to still cook, but I had to step in. And so we're seeing some positivity with regards to these conversations that we are having with community members with regards to how they can look at the gender issues and to ensure that there's equity and social inclusion for everyone, not just for women, but even for people from minority tribes. We have lots of full-day population here in the north of Ghana, and usually they were segregated and not allowed to participate in our social life. But as a result of all this engagement, we now have full-day children allowed into classrooms. Women are allowed to go to hospitals. And so we are beginning to see, again, some positivity.
Sorry, David, I'll
Yeah.
have to
Yeah.
cut that conversation a bit short. We have Akriti back, so I'm going to pass it back to her to take us through the rest of the discussion. We'll probably have 7 minutes now, Akriti, if you can rush us through some of this, and then hopefully we'll share the slide deck and other details in the takeaways email as well.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, so first of all, I'm really sorry, but yeah, to continue. So to do this, our approach was two-pronged. We envisioned schools and homes as shared learning ecosystems, and in this model, we worked towards making home active learning spaces where parents could confidently support learning. And we supported schools to become spaces that are open to community voice, where parents feel seen, heard, and valued. And this is how we did it. Towards revitalizing SMCs, we supported head teachers in planning and structuring the meetings. We used our principal competency framework to measure growth. Meetings were co-planned using a simple template. Space was reserved for parent voice, and clear objectives were set so that these meetings could become meaningful and engaging. We also activated WhatsApp groups as a tool for regular communication. Most families have at least one device at home, and we felt the need to create these virtual spaces where messages could be exchanged even outside of school hours. And it did start off as HT read, but over the year, we've seen parents begin sharing concerns, questions, and appreciation using both mediums of text as well as voice notes. And then we also focused on celebrating small acts. We also focused intentionally on celebrating these small acts, things like attending meetings, helping with homework, or even sending children to school, having eaten breakfast. This kind of, this kind of recognition built trust. It helped parents see how they were already participating, and it gave them other ideas for different ways that they could contribute in. And then this is the competency framework that we used. This is the competency framework that we had used. We had broken down head teacher actions into clear domains and subdomains. There are other domains as well. This is just a snapshot of one of the domains. And it sort of helped us anchor our work in something which is measurable and structured, and which kind of actually made it easier for us to also support our HTs, design our tools, and other things like that. Yeah, and then these are just some visuals of what the process looked like while it was happening. There are some photos from the SMC meetings, our WhatsApp. There are some of our invitations which were hand drawn by the children for their parents, so that they feel invited and welcomed into the spaces. And yeah, these were some structures that actually brought the engagement spaces to life. Yeah, and this was our second sort of approach, which was the activity pitaras. And to actually build home and school learning, we created these pitaras, these learning kits that parents could use at home. HTs facilitated these learning packets in school, and some of our community leaders did home visits to model how parents could use them. One major learning that we had here was the need to simplify the medium. We realized that audio or visual formats would make the pitaras more inclusive, especially for parents who couldn't read. And interestingly, we also saw a lot of older siblings often step up and support the younger ones with the different activities. We actually developed these pitaras over the year, constantly enriching them based on feedback from students, teachers, and parents. We used contextual elements like leaves, stones, bangles, even chapatis, which are our Indian flatbreads, to make learning feel more real and connected to their everyday life. Each pitara was rooted in classroom data, included simple contextual tasks. So you will be able to see these trackers that they were shared to put up on their walls. It helped them bring learning into a home in a way that it was like visible and also doable for families. And like I shared earlier, this is what it actually looked like: children leading the learning, parents actually trying to look at these, make these learning moments happen while they were doing their daily chores and tasks. Uh, yeah, and this is what it actually led to. We saw parent attendance in SMCs rise significantly. HTs thought ahead about what could prevent parents from attending and came up with multiple creative solutions. And I mean, for instance, there was Sushila ma'am who scheduled an SMC meeting during lunch hours so that our parents who are daily wage earners could still attend without losing a day's income. And over time, we saw parents also start sharing more in schools. They talked about what their children were learning. They noticed improvements in reading or math, and even brought up different challenges that they were facing. Some like bank account openings, or we saw our principal invite parents to think about what kind of financial decisions were to be undertaken, and we saw these conversations start happening more and more in the school and not just outside it or like in confinements. Uh, yeah, and with the regular interactive pitaras, we saw more parents engaged in at-home learning. In many households, we saw older siblings support the younger ones, and learning sort of also became something that families did together, not just something that happened in school in isolation. Yeah, and so what's next for us? We also recognize that much of this work was initiated and driven by our head teachers. And so as we move forward, and as we have also learned from our interventions, we want to actually build the capacity of our SMC Adhyaksh, the parent chairs, to take more ownership of these spaces, to become not just participants, but also champions and idols of school community engagement within their own communities, so that these SMC spaces are can also actually become very parent-led, can also discuss challenges that are coming from the parents itself and ideas that are coming from the parents. So yeah, this is what our intervention was like. Thanks a lot. Any questions? We are very, very open. Yeah.
Thank you, Akriti, for providing learnings on not just what is working, but also what's not working. I think for our attendees, we have covered a lot today, so it might be worthwhile to just jump into a quick breakout group discussion. This will be a really short one again, to just think a little bit more about and reflect deeply on everything that we have heard today. We are now going to divide you into breakout groups. Essentially, we're going to ask you to self-select in a breakout room based on a model or tool that you are most curious to learn more about and which you think might be more relevant to your context. Group 1 is going to be Brookings, Group 2 is going to be AfriKids, and 3 is going to be SEF. Once you're in your group, just very quickly introduce yourself if time allows for it, but we really would like for you to go deeper into 3 questions. We may not have time to go through all 3, but these are just kind of examples of things you could be discussing in your group very quickly. We will probably go in a breakout group for about 8 minutes now, or maybe like 7 minutes, after which we'll come back to the larger group and then just do some closing steps. So we'll see you soon in the large group. But before we break you into the group, we'll also share a quick note-taking template with you in case you'd like to jot down things that your group is discussing. And Ajay, over to you to open the breakout groups. Welcome back to the main room. We wouldn't have time to discuss what you were talking about in your smaller groups because we're almost at time. But before we wrap up the session, I'd just like to say a big thank you to all of you for joining and engaging in the session so thoughtfully, and to our speakers for sharing such detailed and rich snapshots of their work. I'm sure it wasn't easy to summarize your work in a couple of slides, so thank you for doing that. We will be sharing out a takeaways email with key discussion highlights, resources, and contact details, so please keep an eye out for that. Our final session in the series is coming up on June 10th, where we will talk about fathers, and we hope to see a lot of you and all of you in that session next time. But before you log off, please take a moment to quickly fill out a feedback poll that we'll quickly just launch right now. It's just 3 questions, will take less than 30 seconds. But this is supremely helpful for us in assessing what's working, what's not working, and what we need to do differently. Once you have completed the survey, please feel free to drop off. But thank you everyone for your lovely engagement today, and have a great rest of the day.
I would like to know if I can connect with the AfriKids. If I could get the emails of Eric and the director, or I did subscribe to the emails, but I would like to know if I could just connect to the
Sure.
AfriKids.
Absolutely. If AfriKids team would like to just drop their email directly to Afia, or I'll separately write an email connecting both of you as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Likewise, I also want the email of David, AfriKids Ghana.
Okay. I'll do that in the chat right now.
And David, I'm in Tamale, so we can link up.
Oh, okay.
Very well. Yes.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yes.
So just give me a